What's up, my Nerevar incarnates? Humphrey here, and today I'll be doing an Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind skills tier list. This will just be my general feelings towards skills, and not necessarily how good they are for the player. Starting at the top, we have the Dagoth tier, the highest possible ranking a skill may receive, and all the way at the bottom, we have the Gnor tier, the lowest possible ranking a skill may receive. Going in the order of which the skills appear in the character creation sheet, starting at the top, we have the block tier. Now, block works a little different in Morrowind. Morrowind has like a RNG-based combat system. Probably in most games, when you want to block, you click right-click or some other button, and your character will raise its shield and negate some enemy damage in exchange for some fatigue or something. But in Morrowind, it works a little differently. You just equip a shield, and depending on how high your block skill is, you have a chance to deflect enemy attacks, which some people might not like, but I actually like it quite a bit. Because when you do get a good block off, it feels very satisfying. Your character plays an animation of raising its shield, and you take no damage, cool sound plays and stuff. So I like block quite a bit. I don't get it very often, but I think I'll rank block pretty highly here. I think I'll put block in the A tier. Next up, we have armorer. So armor affects how well you can repair your armor and your weapons. Armors and weapons degrade over time, and the more they degraded, the less useful they are, the less damage weapons will do, and the less damage armor will negate. Armor I don't think is super useful. I think even without it as a major or minor skill, or even if it is low, you can still use repair hammers just as you find them to repair your stuff as you're out adventuring. You find lots of repair hammers, and you can always pay an armor to repair your stuff fully. I'm going to put armor pretty low down in the list. I'll put it in the... I think I'll just put it in the E tier for now. No, I think I'll put it in the Gaynor tier, the Gnor tier. I think it's pretty awful. I would never get it. It's pretty boring too. Just repairing your stuff. If you could make armor and weapons, it'd probably be better, but you can't do that in Morrowind. It just depends on how well you can repair your stuff. Next up, we have medium armor. So medium armor affects how effective medium armor is you're wearing. The higher your medium armor skill, the more effective your armor rating will be while wearing medium armor. I think medium armor is some of the coolest armor. Probably the low level medium armor is the guards in Balmora, the House Halu guards wear. It's the bone mold armor. I think that one looks the coolest. Also, orcish armor is medium armor, which looks really cool. I usually get medium armor on any kind of combat character I play, so I like medium quite a bit. I think it all looks really cool. I'm gonna put medium armor in the A tier. I like medium armor quite a bit. Next up, we have heavy armor. Just the same as medium armor, except for heavy. Heavy armor, it's Daedric armor. It's the most powerful armor in the game. It also has like steel armor and iron armor. But I don't really like heavy armor. It weighs down your character quite a bit. You can't carry a ton. But in the later levels of the game, when your character is high level, has high strength, can carry a lot, maybe it's good. And Daedric armor probably is the coolest looking armor in the game. It's also like the highest level for enchantments and armor rating in general. I'll give heavy armor a B tier. I like medium armor more, but heavy armor is still pretty good. Next up, we have blunt weapons. Blunt weapons are maces, they're clubs, they're staves, they're anything that you like hit somebody hard with, like maces and stuff. I like blunt weapons quite a bit. I like them more than swords. I think they're cool for like paladin characters, because paladin characters like to beat up undead, and when you're fighting a skeleton, slicing it isn't going to do anything because skeletons don't have any flesh or anything like that, so you want to crush their bones with a mace or something. So I like blunt weapons quite a bit. I'll put blunt weapons in the A tier. I like blunt weapons a lot. Keening. Not Keening, but Sunder. Sunder's a blunt weapon. It's the end of game blunt weapon's very cool. One of my favorite weapons in the game happens to be a blunt weapon. Next up, we have Long Blade. Probably the most generic hero fantasy setting weapon. Long blades. All the heroes use long blades. I'm not a fan of long blades. I think they're overused. I don't think there's any like super cool long blades in the game. There's like the Blade of Nerevar, which is in the Tribunal expansion. I'm not a fan of long blades though. I think they're overused. I think they're overhyped. But it's hard to put them in like the C tier because they're so like iconic, I guess. Guess if you get the slash animation, it's pretty good. But if you get like the swipe animation, I'm not a fan. Morrowind has 3 attack animations that usually, I think probably most players just put it on, just use the best one all the time because it's the most effective way to play in the combat. I'll give Longblade a B tier. It's not like C tier. Put it in the B tier. Next up is Axe. Same as all the other weapons. Just determines how well how proficient you are with those weapons, how likely you are to hit. X, I think is pretty boring. Axes, I don't feel like are weapons. They're more like tools for chopping wood and stuff like that. I'm going to give axe a D tier. I'm not a fan of the axes. And finally, we have spears. Now, spears have the longest reach out of all weapons. I'm a big fan of spears. Argonians are my favorite races. And spears, I think, fit thematically with the Argonian race. Argonians are fishermen, and people do fish or spear fishing. I think so. In Oblivion and Skyrim, which are the two other games after this one, spears were taken away. I'm not really sure why. So Morrowind's the last Elder Scrolls game that has spears as weapons. So, and Argonians have like a bonus in spears. I'm gonna give spears the first Dagoth tier. I really, really, really like spears. I like poking my enemies to death. I really like the thrust animation. I think it looks really cool. Spears will go in the Dagoth tier. And finally, in the combat section of the skills, we have athletics. Athletics determine how fast you can move. In Morrowind, you move really, really slowly. So having high athletics is nice to get around the world faster. It's kind of a weird thing to get as a major skill because just by playing the game, you're going to be getting your athletic skill higher and higher and higher up. Just by playing the game, you don't have to go out and grind for it or anything. Kind of conflicted on where to put athletics in the tier list. Athletics determines how fast you can move. I mean, moving fast is fun. I'll give it an A tier. I would not get it as a major or minor skill, but just having high athletics is fun. So I'll put athletics in the A tier. Now moving into the magic section of the skills, we have the enchant skill. Enchanting determines how likely you are to enchant a weapon, how effective you are at recharging enchanted weapons with soul gems and stuff like that. Enchant's pretty powerful. Enchanting items is always powerful. You always want to get lots of items, and more when you can wear clothes and armor, and clothes and armor can both be can be enchanted along with weapons. But I don't usually get enchant as like a skill at all. I usually just kind of ignore it the entire game and pay an enchanter to make any kind of enchanted weapon or armor that I might want. But enchanting's definitely very powerful. So I'll give enchant a B tier. No, I'll give it an A tier. A lot of the fun in Morrowind is just getting all the cool stuff that you want to get on your character, all the cool clothes and cool armor and cool weapons, and enchanting's part of that. You always want to enchant your armor that you get because it makes the armor and weapons that much cooler. I'll give an enchant an A tier. Next up, we have destruction. Probably the most mage character's way of doing damage. Does frost spells and poison spells and spark and fire spells, fireballs, touch, damage health, stuff like that. Bread and butter for all magicians. But I don't know. I think destruction's kind of boring. There's not a ton of, you don't get any feedback when you hit somebody with a destruction spell. When you hit somebody with like a sword or a mace or a spear or whatever, blood will fly out of them and they'll stagger back and make a cool hit sound. So destruction, I think I'll put in the C tier. Still fun to run around and use spells and stuff, but I don't think it's as fun as hitting somebody with a weapon. I think that's a lot cooler. Next up, we have alteration. So alteration is probably the bread and butter of like all mage characters. Pretty much all mage characters probably get this as a major skill. Alteration lets you levitate, water walk, water breathe, swift swim, unlock doors, which is something really important if you don't get into the security skill. Because nobody wants to be like behind an unlocked door and not be able to get into the room they want to get into, or find a chest that they can't unlock, and you're never gonna know what's in it unless you want to come back, and that's annoying. And you can get the like unlock level 100 spell, I think, pretty early on in the alteration like leveling up process. Alteration, I'm gonna give a Dagoth tier. I think alteration is really, really cool. Mobility in Morrowind's a lot of fun. Levitating and water walking and stuff like that. Getting around the map a lot easier. Also, once you get the unlock level 100 spell, you're kind of set for the entire game. There's not a door that's gonna that you can't open with an unlock level 100 spell, which is an alteration class. So I think it's pretty good. Next up, we have illusion. Illusion has illumination, which makes exploring caves a lot easier. It'll illuminate around your character, making the cave not as dark, which I'm a big fan of because I'm a big scaredy cat. Whenever I go in a cave, I get a little scared. So having a illumination spell handy is nice. Paralysis to paralyze an enemy. They can't do anything. They just stand there. It's very powerful. Silence, make the enemy not be able to cast any spells. Calmness, which is pretty good. Calmness will, if an enemy attacks you and you have a high enough calmness spell, you can calm them down and then they'll stop attacking you, which is pretty useful in I think in Oblivion and Skyrim, you can like raise your shield and try to talk to an NPC, and you'll attempt to, what's the word? Not forfeit, but you try to get them to stop attacking you. And in Morrowind, you have to use a calmness spell, so it's pretty niche. It also does invisibility, chameleon, and charm, which charm you can use on a NPC and raise their disposition. So it's kind of like a speechcraft spell. I think illusion's pretty good. I think I think it does a lot of things that normally you wouldn't be able to do without a high illusion skill. I'll put it in the B tier. Illusion will go into the B tier. Next up, we have Conjuration. Conjuration lets you summon either weapons and armor, which is kind of useful. But more importantly, it'll let you summon enemies to fight for you. So you can summon skeletons or ancestral ghosts or Daedric enemies or even like golden saints and stuff, really powerful enemies. Conjuration is really cool. I remember my first character as a kid always had Conjuration because I always wanted friends to fight with me. I think Conjuration is really cool. Up a Conjuration, although I don't use the like summon armor or weapons very often. Like I think that's kind of annoying to have to summon an armor or weapon every single time you go into battle. But still, Conjuration is really cool. I really like summoning enemies to fight for me. So Conjuration goes into the Dagoth tier. Next up, we have Mysticism. So Mysticism, recall and mark spells, which are really useful. You can mark like a quest giver that you'll be going back to a lot and instantly teleport there. You can do that for like a merchant that has a lot of gold that buys everything, can mark there and always just teleport there when you need to go sell stuff. Divine Intervention and Almsivia Intervention, which will take you to the nearest Imperial Shrine or temple, and also does Soul Trap, which lets you put souls into gems for enchantment, and Telekinesis, which lets you like interact with objects that are farther away, which you can do some sneaky stuff with as far as thieving is concerned. I think the problem with like Mysticism is that none of these are like timed like things that you need. Like Conjuration, if you're in the middle of a battle and you need to conjure up something, you want a high level Conjuration skill to get that up real quick. Or Destruction, you definitely don't want to be failing a bunch of destruction spells during combat because you'll die. But with Mysticism, like Recall and Divine Intervention, all that, when you use those spells, you're not in combat, so you can just kind of keep spamming them until you finally get it. So even if you have a low chance, you can just take the 60 seconds of keep resting up to get your magic back and keep spamming your recall spell or whatever you want to use. Soul Trap might be the only one that you might have to use, but I would never get Mysticism as a minor or major skill. It just kind of levels up as you use it for the recall spells, which are the mark and recall spells are probably the most useful. So I'm going to give it an E tier. Although it is very useful, it's like, it doesn't matter if it's low level or not. You can just kind of spam the spells until you get the chance to actually cast it. Next up, we have Restoration. Restoration skills, they can buff you, they can heal you, your fatigue, can heal your health, they can buff your acrobatics and jump around the world. They can buff your whatever skill you want, really. It's like they're like buffing spells and healing spells. I like Restoration quite a bit. I'll put Restoration. I think I'll just put it in the B tier. Having to buff before every like encounter you get, it's kind of annoying. But they're really useful like healing spells, and fatigue is very important in Morrowind. So being able to cast any restore fatigue spells, especially over a long period of time, is very useful. I'll give Restoration a B tier. Next up, we have Alchemy. Alchemy is pretty exploitable in Morrowind. You can get very, very powerful things by very, very powerful, very, very early on in the game by kind of exploiting the alchemy system. But that's not really how I like to play. I've never really messed with the alchemy system, to be honest. I do know how it works, but I'm not one to like make my own potions and spend a lot of time in the crafting menu and gathering ingredients and stuff. Although gathering ingredients is fun in Morrowind. There's a lot of ingredients around the world to gather, which is fun. But I've just never really taken part in it personally. So it's hard to rank alchemy when I haven't used it at all, really. I do like gathering ingredients, though. Exploring Morrowind is always a lot of fun. I'll give alchemy a D tier, just because I haven't really used it at all. Next up, we have Unarmored. So Unarmored, how little damage you take when not wearing any armor. Probably most mages will be taking Unarmored. I like Unarmored quite a bit because when you're not wearing armor, you can carry a ton more. You also move a lot faster. So like playing as a mage character, Unarmored's a lot of fun. I'll give Unarmored an A tier. Same with Medium Armor. I think it's up there with Medium Armor being my favorite armor. Playing as a mage character is a lot of fun. Mages are super powerful. Unarmored is usually one of their skills they get. Being able to move around fast and carry a lot more because armor is not weighing you down is nice. And then moving on to the stealth skills, we have security. Security depends or affects how likely you are to lockpick and get behind not trapped, but locked doors and locked chests and stuff like that. That's all it does, which kind of gets overshadowed by mysticism. Mysticism has that unlock spell, or not mysticism, alteration. Yeah, alteration has the unlock spell. But even though like nobody likes to not be able to open up a chest or not be able to get behind a door, somebody put security in the Dagoth tier. I think just being able to explore Morrowind in its entirety and not be able to get behind a door or into a chest is very important. So having security is pretty good, even though it does get overshadowed a ton by alteration. Because alteration, you get that unlock level 100 spell and you're set for the entire game. And you still could get the unlock 40 spell or 60 spell or 80 spell or whatever and make your way up to that. Just like you can with security, but with alteration, you also get the water walking and levitating and the feather and the shield and all the other spells that are also super good. But even though it gets overshadowed, it still gets a Dagoth tier because it's just that good, just that cool. Sneak's kind of boring or broken. Doesn't work very well in Morrowind. Like you can just randomly get spotted even though you have a really high sneak spell. I always remember doing I usually played thief characters as a kid, and the second or third quest in the Balmora Thieves Guild has you go pickpocket somebody for their manor key, and like even though I had like a sneak level 40 and I'm like, this is like the third quest that you probably get as a thief character, still couldn't still couldn't pickpocket him. Half the time the key wouldn't be in his inventory. He would just randomly get me. I think it's a little broken in Morrowind. There was probably some code or some patches to fix that, some fan-made mods to fix the sneak skill, but sneak's pretty boring, or not boring, but broken. Although it's very cool, like I like being a sneaky character and all that. But because it's broken in Morrowind, I'm going to give it an E tier. Not fun. Next up, we have acrobatics. Acrobatics depends or affects how high you can jump, just like athletics. Lots of times, just like athletics, though, you'll be jumping around the map a ton, so you don't really need to like level this up or anything. Your acrobatics and your athletics will just naturally level up as you play the game. The only time I can think of like acrobatics making a difference is in the Thieves Guild quest. There's like a manor you can get into, and on the lower level of the manor is like a lock level 40 and there's guards around. But if you go up the stairs in a neighboring house, you can jump over, and like I guess if your acrobatics is high enough, you can make it to a lower level lock. That's like level 35 or something, and there's no guards around, so you don't have to worry about that. So I guess that's when it's useful. Otherwise, it's just useful for general travel, getting around the world and stuff. I'll give it an A tier, just right next to athletics, just because mobility in games is something that's always fun, and having high mobility is fun. Next up, we have light armor, just like medium armor, heavy armor, unarmored. Affects how well light armor protects you when wearing it. Light armor, I think, is pretty boring. Like, I don't think any of the sets really look cool. Glass armor is the highest leveled light armor, and I don't think it looks good. I think the green kind of looks out of place. Not a fan of light armor. I'm going to give light armor a Gnor tier. Next up, we have short blade. Short blade, yeah, I just don't like short blades, I guess. The stabbing animation looks kind of weird. It doesn't feel satisfying hitting somebody with a short blade. It looks like I'm just poking them just like a little bit. I poke people with spears, but the animation is a lot different. I use two hands. I put a lot of force into it. Short blade, I'm just like poking them with a lockpick. So I'm going to give short blade a D tier. Although keening is a short blade and keening is very cool, it cannot save it from its D tier. Next up, we have marksman. Marksman, how well you use throwing weapons and bows and arrows. Marksman's hard. I think I'll just give marksman a C tier. I don't really use bows that much, but they'd be kind of fun, especially if you pair alteration with marksman. You can levitate around and shoot down on your enemies, and they can't really do anything about it. So that's kind of fun. I'll give marksman a B tier. I do like using bow and arrows, but I don't usually use bow and arrows. Also, it's annoying to have to like make sure your arrows are always stocked up. But bow and arrows are pretty cool, I think. I'll give it a B tier. So we have mercantile. Mercantile affects how well you can barter with NPCs, get better prices, better selling prices, better buying prices. But that's about it. Also, fatigue affects how well you can barter, which is kind of annoying because, especially in the early levels, before you get any kind of restore fatigue, constant effect enchantments, it's probably the first enchantment I always go for, which is always annoying because if you really want to barter, you're going to have to wait for your fatigue to go back up. I guess you can just rest, But remembering to do that's always a flip of the coin, I guess. Mercantile skill, kind of boring. I'm going to give it an E tier. Next up, we have Speechcraft. Speechcraft affects how well you can persuade NPCs and raise their disposition to give you information. So it's how well you can speak to NPCs. I always play as like a Speechcraft character, pretty much in all RPGs, not just Morrowind. I really like playing a character that can talk himself out of a situation or get more information or get more loot out of a quest because of a high speechcraft skill. It's pretty much always a major skill of mine, no matter what character I play. I really like speechcraft. Depending on how useful it is up to debate, but just as how much I like the skill, I think I'll give speechcraft a Dagoth tier. I really like speechcraft. And finally, we have the hand-hand. I've never played a hand-hand combat character, like a monk class, so I don't have much to say about it. I do know how it works, though, is hand-to-hand will damage somebody's fatigue until their fatigue is 0 instead of damaging their health. And then when their fatigue hits 0 and you hit them, they'll fall to the ground, and then you can, once they're on the ground, you can start hitting them for health damage. So I imagine that fights will last a lot longer with fatigue, or not fatigue, but with hand-to-hand, because not only do you have to kill them with their health, but you also have to drain their fatigue all the way down to 0 until they fall down. It's hard to say with hand-to-hand. I guess whenever an enemy fights me in hand-to-hand, like a skeleton or a berserker out in the wild attacking me, I guess I'm always like, oh, it's a Chad, he's using hand-to-hand. So I'll just give hand-to-hand a C tier. Destruction's looking a little lonely there, just because I've never really used it, but it's definitely a Chad move. I'll move it up to B, because it's definitely a Chad thing to do. And that concludes my Morrowind skills tier list. Bye-bye.